One of the goals that I had for this year was to read more classics. I have read a couple of modern classics. I have collected a lot of classics over the last few years. I'll insert a little video clip where you can see them all because they're all up there. And I'm not camera savvy enough to just lift you and show you without it being all rocky. I wanted to actually read some of the classics that I have, and some of them I read when I was in high school, but I really wanted to read them again as an adult because I feel like that I will get more of an impact this time around. I decided to read 2 per quarter, and so for this quarter, the 2 that I picked were Animal Farm and Heart of Darkness. Animal Farm is by George Orwell. Heart of Darkness is by Joseph Conrad. Very different vibes and not at the same time, but let's get into it. The first book that I wanted to talk about was Animal Farm by George Orwell. This was like a wow book. Like, I highlighted and tabbed. I took notes at the end because I ended up doing the audiobook along with this so I could immersive read, and just because sometimes when I read classics, even though this is considered a modern classic, sometimes the way things are worded, my brain squirrels out. My ADHD comes out in full force, and so I wanted to make sure that I was listening to it and I was really absorbing it, so I listened to the audiobook and read along at the same time so that I could take copious amounts of notes. The audiobook that I listened to actually had an introduction by C.M. Woodhouse, whoever that is. He was a journalist, and I liked a lot of what he had to say, and so I took notes just on the book in general, but also of some of the things that he said in the intro. So let's get into this book, because for being my copy, and everyone's copy probably is different, my copy is only 88 pages, and there was so much that was said in those 88 pages. It was crazy. I feel like the journalist really kind of captured what Orwell was thinking when he wrote this, and kind of the mentality that he had going into the publication of this book, especially considering it was published right around the same time as World War II ended, I believe. Yeah, he finished writing it in 1944, so it would have gone into publication probably 1945-ish would be my guess. I don't remember when this was published. I feel like I looked it up at some point, but I don't remember. The broad strokes basics of this book is we have a farm called Manor Farm, and we have a farmer, Mr. Jones, who runs this farm. He doesn't do it very well. He's an alcoholic. He doesn't remember to feed the animals all the time. His farm hands kind of take advantage of the fact that he is a drunk, and so they don't always do their job to the best of their ability. And so we see a lot of neglect from the animals' perspective, because the human that is supposed to be running the farm and taking care of the farm is not. So within the first page, like first page, we have Old Major, who is a aging pig, calling everyone to kind of a farm animal meeting because he has had a dream and he has some wisdom that he would like to impart on the other animals before he passes away. He feels like he doesn't have very long left to live, and so he wants to impart this wisdom onto everyone at the farm before he passes. He believes that the animals of the entirety of England are miserable, not just on their farm. He thinks all animals in England are miserable because of human mismanagement. He does point out that man is their only real enemy because in his mind, what did he say? Something about humans not producing anything. Man is the only creature that consumes without producing. So he dreams of an England that is free of man and that is run by the animals. He dreams of an England where animals are free. He teaches them this song called The Beast of England, and he gives them 7 commandments that he feels like all animals should follow. I don't think it's a spoiler, so I'm going to quickly run through the 7 commandments because they become really important as the story progresses. So the 7 commandments are: whatever goes upon 2 legs is an enemy. Whatever goes upon 4 legs or has wings is a friend. No animal shall wear clothes. No animal shall sleep in a bed. No animals shall drink alcohol. No animal shall kill any other animal, and all animals are equal. So these are the 7 commandments that Old Major gave before he passed away. And he does die a few days after this meeting. And there are 2 pigs, Snowball and Napoleon, who really become like the brains behind how to make Old Major's dreams come to fruition. They really take up the mantle of teaching. They try to teach all the animals on the farm how to read and how to write. They also kind of take up the responsibility of organizing all the animals onto the farm. An opportunity kind of presents itself sooner than the animals thought for them to actually take over their farm. And so they stage this revolution and this revolt, and they are able to kick Mr. Jones and his farm hands out of the farm. And then his wife also leaves quickly as well afterward. From almost the beginning of the book, there is tension between Napoleon and Snowball. They are both vying for who is going to be the person that runs the farm now. They both bring different things to the table, which is interesting. And you would think that after kicking a human out that it wouldn't matter which one of them leads, but apparently it does. I'm afraid that anything else I would talk about is going to be kind of a plot spoiler. So I'm going to kind of be a little more vague from here. What we see throughout the rest of the book is a power struggle, both between Napoleon and Snowball, but then later on between animal and animal as well, which, if you remember, kind of shouldn't happen based on their commandments. There's also this gradual gaslighting of the animals on the farm to make them more compliant with whichever of the 2 wins leadership, which was heartbreaking to see, especially, again, in the times that we live in, to see how easy it is for animals, but, you know, animals, they're just a metaphor for humans, and how easily humans are gaslit into believing something when you hear it enough, that you start questioning your own memory of events, that you start questioning what is real and what is not real if you have these really intelligent and really powerful people telling you something. Well, surely they know better than I do, right? So that was hard to read, but like hard in like a so relevant for our times kind of hard. We see a lot of rewriting of history to fit an authoritarian narrative. We also see, and I think it's highlighted, that history is written by the winners. And that doesn't mean that just because the history they write is what is disseminated, that it is the truth. And it's not always the most accurate account of what has happened. It kind of paints the victor in the best light, but I think enough of us have sat through history classes in high school that we understand that just because this is the story being told, it doesn't mean that it is the correct story. And we see that happening over and over again in this book. There's a couple of quotes that remind me so much of what is going on right now that I wanted to kind of share. It's on page 55 in my book. It says, instead, and she did not know why, they had come to a time when no one dared speak his mind, when fierce, growling dogs roamed everywhere, and when you had to watch your comrades torn to pieces after confessing to shocking crimes. And I do feel like it is getting less safe to speak your mind and less safe for people to speak up against injustice now. And I do feel like we have our own version of growling dogs that are everywhere in our country right now. And so it's just hard. It was hard to read because I don't know how this happens. I tend to always end up reading things that are just so timely. This happened last year with I read 1984 last year, and that was a whole different ball of wax. And then the other one was on page 57 in my book. And it says, on Sunday mornings, Squealer, holding down a long strip of paper from his trotter, would read out to them lists of figures proving that the production of every class of foodstuff had increased by 200%, 300%, or even 500%, as the case may be. So the animals saw no reason to disbelieve him. And so I think sometimes we jokingly say, things are 1,000% cheaper, or, they should pay us for things, and we all laugh about it. But we do live in a time where there are people who put these fictitious facts out there and truly expect people to believe that this is the truth. And there are people who won't question it because, well, if the government says it's true, it must be true. And why would they lie about something like that? And that's all I'll say on that. I also found it really interesting that the pig who lost continued to live rent-free in the head of the pig that won. It was so interesting that even back in the 1940s, someone could see how when you win power by lying against someone who might be more honest, that dishonesty in you is going to manifest as being obsessed with the person who was correct, because you don't want anyone else to know that they were correct. So I really appreciated that part of the book.
Editing Kelly here. After watching these clips back, I'm pretty sure that what I'm talking about would be considered a spoiler, and I don't want to ruin the ending for anyone who does decide that they want to read this book. So if you would like to discuss it, I would love to discuss this book with someone. I do not have anyone to talk about the ending with, and there is so much to say about it, but I'm realizing as I'm watching back through my footage that I just don't want to ruin the experience for you, because I was really shocked when I found out. So just want to let you know why you cannot hear me right now.
I think it also highlights how in the wrong hands, things like democracy and equality and peace can be twisted into something almost unrecognizable. There's a line in here that is, some are more equal to others, and I think he really wanted us to see how in our world that we live in, we still treat human beings who are supposed to be equal to us because they are also human beings, just like an Animal Farm. The animals were the same as the leader. They were all animals, but they were not treated equally. And I think he really wanted society to take a deeper look at why we don't consider all humans to be totally equal. It was neat. Woodhouse said that Orwell would either be remembered as a legislator because of Animal Farm and how he might influence positive change on the future, because he's highlighting how easily our society can be shaped into something that it's not. Or he could be remembered as a prophet, referring to 1984, if we don't heed his advice and continue kind of down this course where the government has excessive amounts of control over their people. So I thought that was kind of cool. I think, he was saying like either way, he's going to be remembered, but like which one are we going to remember him by? Are we going to be living in an oppressive society and we're going to see him as a prophet who foretold this? Or are we going to be living in a place that is better because when you see something, you say something, like an Animal Farm? And it's so frustrating that in 2026, so 80 years later, we're still not completely getting the point of his book. We're not listening, one of the two. I am glad that I read it, and I'm kind of glad that I read it this year, especially when we see globally the kind of rise of fascism again, and the kind of rise of controlling people and dehumanizing people and seeing groups of people as less than because of because of some trait or another. I highly recommend this. I gave it 5 stars. And also, I mean, like you saw, but like I highlighted the mess out of this book. I do think that if you're going to read it, give it time. I know it's only 88 pages and you're like, that shouldn't take that long. But I think it took me 3 days to read it, and not because, oh my gosh, it's so long, but because I wanted to sit down and read it. So I needed to give it my full attention, and I don't have a ton of time, especially over spring break, to give reading my full attention. But I really wanted to make sure that I was taking notes and kind of really absorbed what the story was about. Yeah, so I suggest that you do the same. Be prepared to take notes. Even if you don't like writing in your books and you want to write separately or something, but I think that there's a lot to say in this small little book, and I think it is worth taking the time to absorb. The next book that we're going to talk about is Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. And I think when I was doing my original, like what I wanted to read this year, my copy actually has 2 other short stories in it. It has Youth, a Narrative, and The End of a Tether. I did not read either one of those. I just read Heart of Darkness, and that's only because I didn't super enjoy this, so I wasn't looking to read more into his works right now. There was a footnote that when I was reading through the footnotes referred to Youth, a Narrative, but it was something kind of generic about their time on a boat together, because there's these 4 guys anyway. So you don't need to read it to understand Heart of Darkness. This was a book, and I read it. And I feel bad because it is a classic. There are so many people who love this book, give it 5 stars, read it over and over again. I was actually, after I finished it, I was looking over some reviews to kind of try to see where everyone else stood, and it's very highly rated. I gave it like a 2.5 star. I did not care for it. I think maybe it was just when I read it, I don't think it has as impactful a reach now as it probably did when it was originally published, and it probably was a lot more shocking for the time that it was written in. And for me, it was just a slog at times, truthfully. So this book at its heart is about a man named Marlowe who has always wanted to go to the Congo and ends up with a position to captain a steamboat up the Congo River to find Mr. Kurtz, who is an ivory hunter who has been kind of MIA for a while, and the company, I'm sure it's with the Belgian something or other, I don't remember who the company was. Anyway, and the company would like him to come kind of back to civilization because he hasn't been back in a few years. So broad strokes, that's the book. This story opens with these guys who are on a steamboat, and they are on the Thames, and they're heading wherever the Thames leads to the sea. Wherever it connects to the sea, that is the direction that they're heading in. There is a captain of the ship, and then there are 4 companions that are traveling with the captain, and our narrator is an unnamed narrator, and we never find out his name. And I kind of quickly perused through Youth, and I don't know that he's ever named there either, but it doesn't really matter because he is just telling us about Marlowe's story at the end of the day. So we're kind of getting this secondhand from our unnamed narrator from when Marlowe told them this story on the Thames. So Marlowe begins telling these guys about the time that he was briefly a freshwater captain and all of the events that took place surrounding his one-time commission as a freshwater captain. Occasionally, the narrator does pop in to ask a question or make a point, but that was really confusing because there's not like nothing is italicized, or there's no indication that it is the narrator. You just have to be like, oh, context clues. That doesn't make any sense for what's going on. Okay, they must have been having a conversation together. And read this one too. But that was confusing at times, and it kind of took me out of Marlowe's story. Marlowe goes on to tell them that he's always been really fascinated with maps ever since he was a kid. And because of the time period this takes place in, maps had a lot of like blank spaces because they were undiscovered locations. And he was always like extra fascinated with the blank spaces of the maps. You know, like he always was like, what's going on there? What is there? He was always curious, right? He was Curious George for sure. And one of the places that has always fascinated him, even though by the time he's a grown up, it is not a blank anymore, is the Congo River. He said it looks like a snake, and it had with a snake's head on top, and he's always been fascinated by it, and he's always wanted to go to the Congo River. I will say I did like the way Conrad described things. Sometimes it was too much. But I did really like a lot of the descriptive writing that he did use. And I don't think it was the descriptive writing of the setting that I disliked so much as all the descriptive metaphors that he had that kind of felt exhausting after a while. So he said that he needed to get to the Congo by hook or by crook, which basically mean that he needed to do anything possible to get to the Congo, and he wasn't having any success on his own, so he has to ask a woman for help. He asked his aunt, who I guess has connections within this company that he gets a job with. She knows somebody's wife, so she's able to kind of get him a job, which in and of itself kind of speaks to privilege in Europe, in the upper class of Europe, especially during this time where, and I think that probably was on purpose, you know, talking about how when you want something and you're white back in the 1800s, it was really easy to get it if you had the right connections. And obviously you were owed that trip to the Congo that you've always wanted to go to just because you're a white dude and you have the right connections. So obviously you should go. So I think that was probably, I would like to think that that was probably on purpose by Conrad. I will say that I don't think that he was really qualified for this trip. He had never been to the Congo. He had never really had a lot of interactions with native Africans. He did have experience on boats, but he doesn't have any freshwater boating experience either. So it kind of shows you like how underqualified you can be and still get something if you know the right people. The rest of the book follows him as he makes his way from Europe to Africa, and then from Africa down to the beginning of the Congo River. And then, you know, his boat ends up being like, it had a hole, and so it like capsized, and so they have to spend time fixing it before they even go downriver to look for Kurtz. He doesn't set out to go to the Congo to find this guy. I think part of him getting this position in the company is that, okay, well, we did you this favor and gave you this job, so now you have to go find Kurtz for us. So that is why he's going at the end of the day. And it's just his journey to find this guy. Kurtz is an ivory hunter who is a terrible person, who has no redeeming qualities in my mind, who treats the native people absolutely horrendously, and appears almost godlike to them because of the few bits of, you know, European technology he's brought with him. I think it's hard to care about the journey to get to someone when that someone is just such a terrible person. So Mr. Kurtz lives in a hut deep down the Congo River. We don't know how long, but there was like, you know, 200 miles and 30 miles and another. So it's significantly down the Congo River. And a couple of times, you know, they have thought that he was going to come back when he would send his ivory up, and then partway up, he would just send the natives along with the rest of his ivy, and then he would actually go back. So we're not sure why he's doing this as we're venturing down to get him from his hut. It was probably mind-blowing for the time that it was written in. I know that during this time there were a lot of exposés of the treatment of Native Africans by, there was like a Belgian exploration company, I don't remember what specifically it was, that it came to light that they were treating the people and the land very horribly, and there's a lot of people that were back in Europe who had no idea that this was going on. So I am sure that for the time, this was a mind-blowing book, kind of almost like an expose of how Native Africans were actually treated, how cutthroat the ivory trade really was. It talked a lot about colonialism. It is at its heart a really deep critique about colonialism. Like, Marlowe sees things and he sees how the Native Africans are treated, and he doesn't like it. He doesn't think it's humane. He doesn't think that they should be treated that way. But then, in good European fashion, he also doesn't do anything to help them. He is just a bystander for all of this, and he sees all this horrific stuff happening, and he's like, well, I don't know how to fix it, so he doesn't even try. And I think that at times got me really frustrated, because it was almost like, do you actually care? Because you're sitting aside and letting all this shit happen, and you're not doing anything about it. I can definitely appreciate that Conrad was trying to show how horrible colonialism was. I can appreciate that, which is why I'm like, this was a book that I read, 2.5 stars. It was right in the middle. I don't normally give such low ratings. I normally DNF books that are that lowly rated. But it was just, I couldn't give it a 3. It didn't feel like a 3. But it wasn't egregious in any way. It was just a book, unfortunately. I really hated the way it was worded. It had really derogatory words towards Native Africans. There was a lot of racial slurs. And again, I understand that that was normal for the time, but it still made my skin crawl while I was reading it. And it made me feel very uncomfortable. There is massive trigger warnings for racial slurs throughout this book. If you don't already know that going in, it's a book set in the Congo with white characters in the 1800s. There's going to be racial slurs, so please know that going in. I also didn't love how women were depicted in this book. We were like nothing. Kurtz had a affianced who was back in Europe waiting on him, and it was almost like her entire world was just him, and it was just wild to watch her reaction when Marlowe gets back and he has a conversation with her. But there's even also like a native woman who seems just totally infatuated with Kurtz, and she just is enamored and is mind blown by him, but like we're never shown as anything more. Women were a convenience when he had to ask his aunt for help. Like, ugh, he even was like, egad, like I have to ask a woman for help. Like, hold on. Because I was like, say what now? I tried the woman. He said, then, would you believe it? I tried the women. I, Charlie Marlowe, set the women to work to get a job. Heavens. Like, and again, I understand that was of the time. I just didn't like it, especially now. Especially, you want to be on his side because he is exposing all of this negative stuff that is happening right now, or happening at that time globally, but specifically in the Congo. And then he does stuff like that, and you're just like, oh, you're so close, man. But could you go just a little bit further and see, if you can see the atrocities happening to Native Africans, how about stop and see like how y'all are treating your women, to see if maybe there needs to be some sort of change there as well. I don't know if that was an intentional thing. I do think the depiction of the Native Africans was on purpose. So I don't know if Conrad portrayed women that way as well on purpose. I couldn't find anything necessarily one way or the other, but I just didn't love it personally. And again, he doesn't do anything to help them. He shows how uncomfortable he is, but not a willingness to do anything about it. And I do think that that kind of is supposed to correlate between like how Europeans, as they were hearing this information that was coming out of these places like the Congo, and was hearing about these horrific things that were happening, they were shocked, but then they didn't do anything about it. And so I do think that it kind of mirrors that societal issue that was going on, you know, in the late 1800s when Conrad wrote this book. I do think that if I had read this back in the 1800s, that it would have been a lot more effective for me. I think that just, you know, over time, a lot more books have been written about colonialism. They've been written in a way that is more timeless and is less, frankly, insulting to people. But I don't think this is a bad book in any way. It just was not for me. You know, people are like, yeah, I read it 3 and 4 and 5 times, and maybe it's something that I do need to reread one day later, you know, having that first read on under my belt, and then maybe it'll be more impactful a second time. I don't know, but I'm definitely not in any hurry to like read it a second time. I did understand what he was trying to do. It was not that long of a book either. It was under 100 pages, and it also felt really long. And this one took, I think this one took me 4 days to get through. And again, it's because I kept putting it down. I was like, I don't want to read this right now. I did take notes. You know, it was a slog at times, unfortunately. It was very wordy. There was a lot of metaphors. And again, I understand that was the writing of the time. I just apparently don't care for that. And now I know. It was for me this time around, which is fine. They don't all have to be winners. I'm not going to get rid of it. You know, like I said, there's 2 other short stories in here that at some point I would like to read as well. I just need a break. I'm really hoping in April that I read a little bit of lighter books, because I feel like this month especially has been really heavy with very serious themes, unintentionally, I guess, on my part, but I've just read a lot of heavy books this month, and so I don't really want to. I want to read something that's a little bit lighter and a little more fun next month. Those are the 2 books that I read this quarter for my classics. Next quarter, I'm going to read Pride and Prejudice and A Brave New World, I believe. I'll have to double check. These are the 2 that I'm going to read for the next quarter. I hope this encourages you to read some classics. They don't have to all be bangers for you to appreciate what they were saying, especially for the time period that they were written in. I think classics are so important for us to read, and I hope that this encourages you to pick one up. I hope you have an amazing day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye! Okay. The Farm? Yeah, why did that sound weird? Book. What the hell did I say? Firing inside of you, because firing inside of you. So hard to explain. Oh, what is it? I did have some criticism. I'm glad that I'm read it. So wrong. Okay, Thames. What?
I love you.
I love you too. Love you. I'm all thrown off. I'm using a new tripod, and it is sending me because it is the wobbliest thing ever, which is really annoying. I don't know if any of this is making any sense. And that's all I'll say on that.